Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ThreatLocker webinar on taking endpoint security seriously. Today, we have with us Zach Coleman. He's a current ThreatLocker client and a managed service provider from Tailored Networks in Tennessee. Welcome and thank you for joining us today, Zach.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We were supposed to have another couple of panelists, but it appears as though they've got tied up. So we'll just start without them. If they join later on, that would be great. If not, not to worry. So throughout the webinar, what we really want to do is we want to talk a little bit about how the ThreatLocker and how the zero trust approach helps with endpoint security above and beyond traditional antivirus, and how it is a vital tool in protecting from viruses, malware, ransomware, whatever today's threats are, and how that approach has traditionally only been used in the enterprise, but is now available for managed service providers and even regular businesses that have internal IT presence. We invited Zach. Zach has been a client for ThreatLocker for some time, and he's been using ThreatLocker although some of the new features will hopefully be impressive for him as well. Going back over the last 10 years, we've seen the evolution of malware go from what used to be a nuisance. I used to work at a large multinational company, and while I was at that company, I recall an instance where we actually got a virus one day, and it came through in the form of an executable in a zip file. And we emailed the staff telling them not to open any suspicious attachments. And a few hours later, the lady on the front desk was crying her eyes out because of some inappropriate pop-ups on her computer after she'd opened this attachment. Fast forward to 2017, and we're seeing ambulances turned away from hospitals. We're seeing, even 2019, we're seeing regular city governments writing ransom checks for millions of dollars to foreign entities now to recover their data from theft. And unfortunately, the traditional idea of looking for bad stuff isn't working anymore. So ThreatLocker really exists for one main purpose, and that is to make the concept of zero trust, to make the concept of default deny on the endpoint viable. For anyone who's used application whitelisting as a technique before, they'll understand that whitelisting has long been considered the gold standard in protecting from both known and unknown malware. And the reason for that is because we're not looking for what's bad anymore. We're not deciding, does this application look suspicious? Does this application look, is it known to be suspicious? The idea with whitelisting is we simply block everything. The challenge has always been for ordinary businesses and managed service providers, how do we make this viable? The average computer has somewhere between 20 and 60,000 DLL files, script files on it. And if you've got 1,000 machines and they're all varying different drivers, different packages, just cataloging that to begin with has always been a nightmare. So if you can't define what you're running to begin with, you can't turn on a whitelisting platform. And then going beyond that, when applications update, when Windows updates, when Office updates, when Dropbox updates, those applications are going to stop working in a whitelisting environment. So ThreatLocker set out to deal with, first of all, that issue. And we've done a really great job at that. And I'm going to show you, rather than talk too much up front, I'm going to show you how we deal with those problems and how we make whitelisting viable. But in addition to that, we've also gone one step further, and we've said we don't just want to be able to control what can run and what can't run, but also once an application is running, what can that application do? Can that application access the internet? Can it access your files? Can it interact with other applications? Take Microsoft Office, for example. That's a legitimate application that's on the whitelist, as is PowerShell in many cases. That doesn't mean we want Microsoft Office to be able to call a PowerShell script or call regserve. So we came up with this concept of ring fencing, where we can go one step further than that, and then even setting storage-based policies where you can define what applications can access what storage devices, what files on your file server, what users, what USB drives. All of these things combined really massively reduce the surface area of attack on your system, and make it very, very very, very easily, but also make it very hard and make it very difficult for the bad guys to get in. Zach, before we begin, did you want to add anything in to what I've just said from what you know so far?
I apologize. I'm muting the microphone so that way I'm not coughing into the microphone. This Tennessee weather's driving me crazy. But no, it is a very straightforward system and easy to use once you get fully immersed into it. It becomes a very crucial part of our business in ensuring that employees of different organizations are not executing things that shouldn't be, that would normally not be caught by a GPO or antivirus. And it has worked very well in reducing the number of service requests. And with like Google Chrome, it has its own toolbars and such, and it's actually been blocking those as well. So it's a very easy to use system for notifications when people request access, which Danny will demo as well.
Mike Wood has just joined us from the 20. For those of you who don't know the 20 is, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong and I say this incorrectly, a cohort of managed service providers that group together the ability to knowledge and buying power. So you can take tools like ThreatLocker and you can build knowledge and buying power around them. Mike, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So hopefully I gave you guys a proper introduction.
Yes, you did. That was pretty spot on. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to begin. I'm going to jump right into it. One of the big criticisms of the last webinar was we talked too much first. So I'm going to kind of jump into it, and I'm really going to show you how ThreatLocker helps and how it works. As a managed service provider or as an IT manager, the first stage of ThreatLocker is getting the agent deployed, and we've done a lot to make that really, really easy. And in the brand new build, we've made it even easier. So when you guys first sign up for a trial of ThreatLocker, getting started, you just simply log into the portal. You can download the installer. If you have an RMM, if you use Kaseya, if you use SolarWinds, if you use ConnectWise or BigFix or whatever deployment tool you have, we have special deployment scripts for all of the RMMs. And we have what we call a Stub Installer, which allows you to not only download the application for you, but it will actually match the correct installer for the correct client. So if you do push out through Kaseya, you can just push out the agent and it will automatically add the computer under the correct client on our system. If you choose to install it manually, you can just download the MSI or download the installer. It takes 30 seconds to install. It's a single click and it's going to register the computer on our portal. For those who are managed service providers, all of your clients will be shown on the organizations page here, and you can easily switch between them just by clicking the manage button. And like I said, if you use our Stub Installer with your RMM, it will create the clients for you automatically. So I'll switch back to my main client here. Once the computers are installed, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to install in what we call monitor-only mode. What this means is it's going to give the systems the ability to learn and us to learn what is on these systems and what is running on these systems so we can create policies around that. So if I go into my audit here, the moment I install, first thing I'm going to see is every single application that's being executed. So if a user opens or executes Google Chrome, you'll be able to see who opened it, what computer they opened it on, who it was signed by, was it permitted, was it denied. And likewise, we're also going to track everything that is in the baseline. So we're going to catalog that 20 to 60,000 files on your computers, and we're going to upload them to ThreatLocker so we can build policies based on those. So, and you can see them here. You can see who they're signed by, the hashes, and you can search across all of your computers to see, do other computers have the same file? At this point, we just recommend our clients wait. So you can realistically push this agent out in a few minutes. We did a deployment with a managed service provider a few months ago, and they actually did 1,400 seats at the end of a demo in 15 minutes. And you can just, once the agent's pushed out, it's just going to learn and you can just wait. over the next few hours, and we recommend you let it learn for about a week, we're going to start building policies. So you're going to start seeing policies for known applications and unknown applications. First, we're going to build the known applications. What that means is if you're running Microsoft Office or Google Chrome or Flash Player, we're going to say, we recognize this app. It matches one of our built-in definitions, and we're going to create that policy for you. We're then going to create policies for unknown applications. So if you are a construction company or a healthcare provider and you've got custom medical software or custom software, we're going to build those definitions and create the policies for you on the fly. What we recommend you do at the end of the week is log into the portal and have a look at what would be denied. Even though we're in monitor mode, we're still going to log things as denied, and we're just going to put them in a different category. So this is a small change from the previous version where you'd have to search for the deny policy. Now you can simply come into the portal. You can say, show me everything that's denied. And unlike before, we now have a red and green indicator to say the policy action was denied, but was it actually permitted because you're in monitor only mode? So you can see here, based on my learning, I can see a few files denied. I can see the reason they were denied, which policies they hit. So if I start off with this one, we can say it hit the default policy. It was denied. The effective action was actually permitted because we're in monitor only mode. And if I wish to create a policy around that, I can create that exception or needs to be. The same with the ring fencing policy. So I have a ring fencing policy that prevents Microsoft Office from opening PowerShell. I can see if we'd gone live, this policy would have denied PowerShell from launching here because somebody actually opened it. I did actually forget to say at the beginning of the call, if anyone has questions, feel free to post them in the question section. If I don't come back straight away, I will. You can also raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I'm just going to turn off your mic and you guys can ask the question out loud. And we do encourage that, so it's not my monotone voice the entire time. The next part of this is locking it down. So once you're happy that everything's fine, there's nothing in here hitting the deny policy that you don't like, you can simply go onto the computers page. You can uncheck the computers for monitor only. You can do this on a mass scale as well. And then within 60 seconds, those computers are going to be locked down and all of the policies are going to be active. So if a user tries to open something that isn't on the permitted list, it's going to be denied. These policies that were created, they work like firewall policies. They run in order, top to bottom. They start at the MSP level if you are a managed service provider. If you're an enterprise customer, they start at the enterprise customer level, and then they go down to the individual computer and the computer group level. You can edit these policies, define parameters around them. So say, for example, you saw Dropbox in here and you wanted to deny that, you could simply go into here and change it to deny. You could limit it to certain users if you'd like. So you could say, I only want certain users or certain groups. If you have the Active Directory plugin, you can use Active Directory groups to mark this as well. And they take effect within a minute of you applying them. So if you decide to deny an app, within a minute of you hitting deny, it's going to be denied. Once we've turned off monitor mode, if a user tries to download a document that has a piece of ransomware, if someone exploits a vulnerability in your system, like WannaCry did in 2017, and it's running at the kernel level, someone just downloads an application that's not trusted, that application is going to be blocked. Again, we're not looking for what's good and bad. We're just saying, is it on your list? If not, it can't run. So I'll give you an example here. I'll try and run PuTTY, and the application will get blocked. The user will be presented with this message where they can simply hit request permission. If the IT administrator or the MSP is on the machine trying to install software, he or she can simply put in their credentials here and permit it immediately. In this case, I'll hit request. This can be configured to go straight into your PSA, straight into your ticketing system, and can be approved straight from there. So I can just click approve here. And simply I can say, I want to approve this. The user that's requested access, I want to approve it. ThreatLocker's told me in this case, we know what that application is. We know all of the dependencies that are required for this application. And if that application updates, we'll update that definition. So I can just hit permit here. And within 60 seconds, the user is going to be able to open that file.
And it is within 60 seconds. It works really well for our clients whenever they request something and they call in and say, hey, I truly do need access to this. We're able to quickly look at what the file is it signed, and what that hash is, and just double check things before we allow it.
So just keeping an eye. Somebody did ask a question. Does this work with Apple Macs? Currently, we do not have a Mac version. We will have a Mac version released at some point next year. It is going to be more limited than the Windows version because of access to the operating system. Can the request be tied to the machine ID and their contact information? And someone has, another question has been, can the request be tied to the machine ID and their contact information? Yes, everything that's requested, it does log the machine, the user that requested it, and even in the audit, you can see the details here. So we can always go back into the audit here. And we can see now that this deny is actually red because it was out of monitor mode, and we can see all of the information in there as well. Okay, the next part of this is, well, what happens if there's a Windows update or an Office update or a Chrome update or an Adobe update? And that's where ThreatLocker has really been valuable in enabling zero trust in the managed service provider world, and also the regular size, the medium-sized business world. In that, not only are we giving you the software to configure the whitelist automatically profiling, but when you have a policy such as an operating system update, like a Windows 10 update, we have a team that monitors those updates 24 hours a day. The moment those updates are installed, we're downloading those files, we're extracting them, we're getting the hashes, and we're adding them into our database. So if you have a policy to allow Windows, which you should do, we have seen people delete it before, we don't recommend it. It's going to, we're going to make sure that if the next version of Windows is released, the next Windows update, that is always allowed. Patch Tuesday alone, last month, we added 42,552 files or something in that region, unique files from Windows updates. 70% of those files weren't signed. So one of the big challenges with zero trust is typically you'd have to make sure you add those files before you run the update. With ThreatLocker, we did that. The moment those updates hit Microsoft servers, we're downloading those updates, we're installing them, so you don't have to worry about them being blocked. And it's not just Windows updates, it's Office updates and Chrome updates and TeamViewer updates. We're not here to say if you should or shouldn't run an application, but if you do have a policy for TeamViewer and TeamViewer releases an update, you don't have to worry about that policy that update being denied, or Dropbox or Chrome or whatever it may be. And because we are on top of that, and we continue to extend our database of built-in applications. As we sign up more clients, we find out what are the applications people are using and make sure we have relationships with those vendors to build them into our database. The next part of this is what happens with custom software. And this often is a question, well, great, we've got all of the definitions. Permitting Putty was easy. Permitting Teams is easy. Permitting Dropbox is easy. But what happens when we download our custom dental software or our custom application or custom print driver? How is ThreatLocker going to handle that? Because there could be multiple files. An example of this is I installed FreeCAD a few months back. And when I installed it, there was 540 unique files as part of the installation. None of those files were signed, which meant I was really only left with two options from a whitelisting perspective. One is add all the hashes to those files, or the second one was to add the entire folder. And we really don't want to be in a situation where somebody's adding an entire folder and excluding it from their whitelist. So what ThreatLocker did is we introduced what we used to call installation mode and is now called profiling mode. And we've made some changes in it with the new build. The idea with installation mode is if you have a custom application like FreeCAD, you can track the files that are being installed or updated during that installer. I'm going to use Notepad++ in my example. Oh, I'm going to delete my definition. I thought I cleaned everything up, but apparently not. So I'll use Notepad++ in my example, and I can see here, I can hit request permission, or I can say my administrator is present. For those who are familiar with ThreatLocker right now, that they're used to seeing an installation mode checkbox there. And what that does is it allows you to track installed files and not just the one file you're permitting. We know what Notepad++ is. So you don't need to use installation mode, but I'm going to say, I don't care. I'm going to create a custom definition because I'm going to say, maybe this is medical software and we don't know what it is. And I'm going to enable this profiling mode. The original method was just installation mode. And what that did was that tracked changes to the system during the installation. We added this option for installed and executed file. This has been quite a popular request where someone had already installed the update and they wanted to track which files were required to run it. So now you can actually track files after they've been installed through the second optional as well. So I'm just going to say installed files for now because I'm only installing the application now. You'll see here that now I've enabled it. This has popped up here saying it's been enabled. I can go through the installer. Once I've finished the installation, I can hit end and it's cataloged all of the files that have been installed during that application. So if I go here, I can literally see every single application, every single file, and it's built all of the rules for me. Now I can do manual overrides. If I wanted to say, I want anything in this folder to run, I could just add that rule in there. And there's no reason you can't do that. You just shouldn't, because it's potentially leaving a bigger hole than necessary. And the ultimate objective here is to say, we want to reduce our surface area as much as possible. I'm just reading the question here. So we have a question. I think it's an answer. Oh, so it's an answer from Zach. So we have a question from an MSP asking, can we share items across multiple customers? Zach kindly shared the answer for us. There is a global group. So if you want to apply a policy to all of your customers, you can simply apply it to the global group and then it will apply to all of your customers. Okay, so I'm hoping I haven't missed any other questions here.
David has a question of what is installed files and execute?
So the difference between, and probably the easiest way for me to do this is to show you the difference. If I was to just delete these here for the moment, I'm going to delete both of these policies. And I'm going to say here, because we can always start this profiling mode without something being blocked. So I'm going to start the profiling mode here. And I'm going to just say, first I'm going to start it with I'm going to test this with profile installed files only. So what this is now doing is it's tracking changes to my system. So if I was to go into my downloads folder and I was to copy, I think this here, that's going to, and then I hit end, it's going to say someone's installed that file. So when I search in here, test installed files, I can see that that installed file was created. That was the only file. If I'm to use installed and profile file, executed files. So now not only is it going to track the installed files, but it's going to track executed files that would have ultimately been denied. So if I'm trying to run something and it's being blocked, I can turn this on, let it run, and figure out what's running. So if I say here permit, I'm testing executed. Now, of course, putty. So now I open putty and hit end profiling mode. And what we'll see here, I've done this right. I can see the hash for putty because this is executed and that would have been denied. So, and that's the whole, where the executed, and this is a brand new feature, is where it's really valuable is if you've installed it while it was in monitor mode or something like that, rather than, or if you've installed it, or you just copied the files to the computer and you didn't actually run an installation. So you never had a reason to put it in installation mode. And now you're trying to open it and it blocked the file. So you permit it and then it blocks the next file. So then you permit that and it blocks the next file. By putting it in profiling mode for execution, it allows you to just say, let something run and capture that information and learn from it. And then that information could be shared across all of your clients. It can be shared across all of the computers in the company or even the computer group. So I'm just reading, to further expand on the global policy, when you created a custom app policy, is that policy available to be applied to the global group immediately? Oh, yes. So you can just go into here. If you want to change something here to be the global group, you can just go in here and say, I want to apply this to everything in the global group. And it takes within 60 seconds. The files created in the app.
I'll take Andrew's question there. He wanted to know the typical time to get up and running and what's required as far as tech time to keep it up and running for 500 agents. So we joined back in the end of July, I believe it was, and we deployed within the first 4 weeks. It was roughly about 250 endpoints, and we're now up over well over 500. But the time to get up and running was surprisingly quick. It did not take us long to get things going. The biggest time-consuming part was just going through and verifying that all the things that were cataloged, we wanted to actually continue to allow. So there is a little bit of housekeeping that has to be done, because there are going to be things that you may see in your RMM, but then once you see it in the ThreatLocker layout, you may decide that you don't want those particular things running and may want things cleaned up. So once you start enabling the ring fencing and all, it's very quiet as far as that goes. And then on the tech side of things, you can allow technicians to only install software that they're working on, so that way they don't have access to push it through a whole group or throughout the whole organization or add to the global. So they can only, if they're out installing a certain piece of application, they can install it themselves, and then you can come back and edit that application, either be a part of a certain group or a part of the entire organization.
Thank you, Zach. And I think, and there's two parts to that as well. I'm just going to elaborate. So when you first deploy, it's going to create everything you have, almost everything. We do have exclusions for things we consider high risk. So sometimes you'll see unsigned files that we excluded because we didn't like it, because it looks suspicious. But it'll catalog pretty much everything here. The best way to do this is, the first thing, draw a line in the sand, I like to say. So don't let it stay not locked down any longer than it has to. So draw a line in the sand and lock it down. Even if there's things in this list you didn't want, it's better to draw a line and say nothing new is coming. And then you can go through the list and say, I want to remove things that I don't want, or delete things that I don't want. What I like to do, and this is a relatively new feature as well, where we've added this filter, is because some of these you'll see like 600 items in the list. Like my list is quite slim. What I like to do is go through here after a month or 6 weeks after deploying and say anything that doesn't have a last match date. So that basically means anything that's never ran, just delete it from the list. Because if it hasn't ran within the first 6 weeks, then it probably has no business being on your machine. And it's just increasing the surface area of attack for no apparent gain. Then obviously it's just a case of going through, and Zach was one of our very good managed service providers, actually went back and said, I'm going to delete everything from the list that I don't want in there. I'm going to say, well, we shouldn't be running Dropbox. I'm going to remove it, and we shouldn't be doing this. And so that's, and that adds work, but that's obviously a very good thing to do as well, because you're now saying, I'm really going one step beyond just what can run. I'm making sure that I clean up from previously as well. The next question was deploy global policies one client at a time. So when the policies are, oh, sorry, Zach, if you'd like to answer that one.
Oh, I was just checking them off so that they'd leave the list, but I don't mind answering it. You can deploy one at a time and then come back and add them to the global, so that way any future are added to any other clients, it will allow that.
So yeah, and if you want to deploy, if you add something to the global and you want it to go effective to everybody, you can just go into here and say deploy to everybody. It does integrate with PSAs and RMMs. We have various integrations, and we have various instructions for email connectors, and the links will go directly into your PSA, so you can unblock it. There was another question, so I'll answer. Answer live. And what if files, and someone asked if what if files are created over the network. When you use installation mode, you can choose to whether it's a specific logged in user or the whole system. And you can do that here as to what it's tracking. Normally on the PC level, you shouldn't be having people connect to your PCs over the network anyway. So that's obviously important to track. And the other thing is you can also see everything that was created. So after an application is created, you can go back in and just do a review and see why was this file created, what was it done. What computer was it found on, what file was it found, what was the hash, what was the cert. All of the notes are kept here in the audit. The next part of this, I'm going to pause on some of the questions because we'll get too distracted, is really about the ring fencing. So the whitelisting has been really great at controlling what can and can't run. The ring fencing is going to step that up and say, well, once something is running, what can that application do? So an example of this is I have a policy here that's turned off. So I'll run it first. I have a document in my documents folder here. If I open this document, it has no macros in. If I click on this link, it fires up PowerShell. I can potentially pipe in commands here like upload files, copy files, delete files, encrypt files, even using built-in tools that are permitted on your whitelist. And no antivirus, no whitelist is going to stop me because these things are good files and good applications that I'm using. So what we want to do is we wanted to go beyond that and deal with the issue of fileless attacks, exploits. Another example of this is last month or the month before, Microsoft released a mid-month security patch for Internet Explorer where an attacker could launch a fileless attack using PowerShell to run commands on your computer if you went to their website. That was a perfect example of where the ring fencing helps, because not only can we define what can run and what can't run, but we can define how that can interact with other applications. So in this case, we're saying Office is permitted, but we want to block interaction with any of the following applications. And you can add to this list, or you can just say stop interaction with any application apart from the following. In the managed IT world, we tend to see more of we want to block interaction with these dangerous apps because it's a lot of work to maybe catalog all of the printers for all of your clients. In the enterprise world, we tend to see it the other way, where we'll say we're going to block interaction with anything, and then we're just going to do it by exception. Now, if it's not on the whitelist, it can't be opened anyway, regardless to whether it's open from Office or whether it's open from a user. But it's really about stopping items on your whitelist talking to each other. So in this case, we've just blocked interaction with that. If I try and run the same program again, Office will still open, PowerShell will still open. But if I click on this link, it cannot call PowerShell. And we can see here in the audit that it was ring fenced. And now, again, we're seeing this in red because we're not in monitor mode anymore. And we're seeing it was actually denied from opening because of this policy. That goes up and beyond with that, in that we can now also say what applications can talk to the internet. So in the case of the Internet Explorer vulnerability, the ring fencing stopped it in two areas. One was it stopped Internet Explorer being able to talk to PowerShell. But even if you didn't have that policy in place, or somehow something else happened and it was another application that called PowerShell, we can also then restrict applications from accessing the internet. So in the case of PowerShell, we recommend that you restrict access to the internet, save a few of your built-in RMMs or monitoring servers or things like that, and just block everything else from going to the internet. So that way, if someone does manage to open PowerShell, I denied Notepad++ in my test when I was deleting them. If someone does manage to open PowerShell, it can't go out to the internet except those trusted servers. So if I try and go to test here, it gets blocked. And you can see here in the audit that it was ring fenced. Again, you can see the policy that ring fenced it. and why it was ring fenced. The other cool thing about this ring fencing is when you have it enabled, you can see everything an application is doing on the internet. So right now, I'm pretty sure I have it enabled for Google Chrome. I can literally go in here and see, apparently my life's pretty boring, everything that Chrome's doing on the internet. I've got denies, any deny. There you go. Everything it's doing, every website it's talking to, if I just say network traffic or registry traffic or whatever it may be, it's like having a mini version or centralized version of Wireshark running on your application, so you can see exactly what the application is doing and making sure it's not being exploited. You can just deny certain servers, you can permit certain servers, you can use it to block websites, although it's not intended as web filtering. One of the other ways we see it used quite often is with Internet Explorer, where companies will say, I'm going to block Internet Explorer from going online, except the following few sites that need Internet Explorer, because I don't want users browsing the web with an old, out-of-date, unsecure browser. So you can really restrict that surface area of attack and massively limit your exposure. So the next part on this, I'm going to pause as well to let anyone ask any questions on the ring fencing. The next part on this is really where we go beyond just what can run and what it can talk to, but we're able to set policies around file structures, around files on our hard drive, around USB drives. But before I get into that, if anyone has any questions on the ring fencing, now's probably a good time to throw it out there. So the next part of this, and this is actually a separate component, you can buy this separately if you have clients who don't wish to use the application whitelisting or the ring fencing, is the storage control. The first thing about the ThreatLocker storage control is we audit everything. So every single document, every single file that's accessed on any storage devices, and storage devices could be USB drives, they could be local drives that are monitored, they could be network shares. It really doesn't matter. We're not just saying only USB drives, but anything that's accessed on a storage device is monitored. So if I go onto my little fake file share here and open a file, save a file, I'll try and copy that file to a USB drive. Apparently I don't have that locked down, delete a file. All of that is logged in the audit in real time. So I can go in here and I can see everything. Forget about Chrome, I've got too many search fields here. Everything that happened to that file is logged. So I can see this file was opened by admin on PC4. This is the policy and this was the program that opened it, not just the user, but also the application. I can see it was opened and read using Notepad. I can see it was written using Notepad, so someone changed it. Someone read it again using Explorer, and finally wrote it to a second hard drive. It was a SCSI drive. If it was USB, it'd show that, the serial number of the hard drive, whether the drive was encrypted, and then finally I deleted the file. If somebody moves a folder, moves a file, that's going to be logged. So if someone in one of your users calls the help desk and says, my files have gone, you can go in the audit and say, yes, that's because you deleted them or because you moved them. And we can see who did it, what computer they did it on, what program they used. It really is very granular at logging information. If you have a user sitting in Starbucks copying things to and from a USB drive, you're going to be able to see that within a minute of them doing it. If they don't have an internet connection, when they get an internet connection, it's going to send those logs up to you. The next part of this, of course, the audit is great, but the next part of this is the ability to create really granular policies. So to give you some examples on policies, I'm going to turn some policies on here. Workstations. So I'm going to change my audit all policy to deny. I have so many policies, block saving to desktop. Deny policies. Okay, so I have a policy here, for example, that allows me to read and write access to this file share. And what's interesting about this policy is what I've done is I've said, not only am I restricting access to the share, but I'm also saying which programs are allowed to access it. This is really important for a few reasons. Every time we permit an exe to open on our computer, every time we open a file, a DLL, a script file, that application has access to everything that we do as a user. So you don't have to be an administrator to encrypt all your files on your file server. And with the application whitelisting, that's going to stop that ransomware running. But let's just assume you permitted something, or you just permitted a little cheap app because it seemed legitimate at the time and it turned out to be really bad. That application has access to everything that that user does. It can copy the data, it can delete the data, it can do whatever it would like with it. By putting policies in place that don't just restrict user access to applications, but application access to applications, we can really harden our system above and beyond what just can and can't run. So in this case, and I'm just going to permit Notepad++ because I denied it when I was showing those examples. Just permit that very quickly. Oh, it's taking its time. There you go. We won't get the update. So an example of this is if I go onto my file share here and I open this application with Notepad, that is on my allow list. Even though Notepad++ is on my whitelist, it doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be able to talk to my file server. PowerShell probably doesn't need to be able to talk to the file server. And by restricting these apps from accessing it, we essentially harden our system above and beyond what can and can't access the file server. This is also used a lot with backup systems. If you're using Veeam or you're using Acronis or Datto or whatever the backup solution may be, you probably only want that backup solution to access the backup drive, the backup server. So you can limit the access to just the backup application. That means the user can't browse to it, a file can't be deleted, another application can't access the file, or even things like QuickBooks. If you're running QuickBooks on a share, if you only allow QuickBooks access to that folder, it prevents the user going and just copying that off the share or going into a web browser and uploading that file from the share. We have a couple of questions, so I'm going to pause and answer those. The first one is endpoint performance hit due to local processing and latency to the ThreatLocker cloud. We do not talk to the cloud in real time at all. At any point in time, all of the policies are downloaded and run from memory on your computer. So at any point in time, it should never have to go to the cloud to talk to ThreatLocker. The only time we go is to check if there's a new policy set. So there should be no latency there at all. In terms of the performance overhit, the general overhit should be about 1/10 of your antivirus. The biggest hit we're going to hit is memory, and that's because we load all of the policies into memory. If you're seeing anything more than that, it's probably because of some kind of weird application conflict and we need to create an exception for it. So someone else, do we have base policies or do you need to, is it clean state and you have to build the policies yourself? So when you first install, it's going to profile everything on your machine and build policies based on what we found during the learning period. And then in terms of the ring fencing, we have policies that you can add, like suggested policies that we recommend you add for all of that. And we're going to have default policies to allow USB and allow network drives, but we recommend you can just change them to deny if need be. And another question we have here is, how do we prevent a user or a bad actor from turning off ThreatLocker protection at the endpoint? We have something called Tamper Mode. It is on by default now. If you are an older ThreatLocker client, you need to turn it on. And when you go into the computer group page, you can edit a group and you can just simply check the tamper protection box. This prevents the user from uninstalling, deleting, stopping, killing, changing anything about ThreatLocker. The next part of this on the storage policies is we saw how the shares can be massively protected, but we also have the ability to do simple things like block USB drives or block external storage full stop. So in this case, I have two policies here. One is to block any external storage and the other one is to block USB drives. So this one here just simply says deny read and write access to anyone in the workstations group that uses a USB interface. These policies run like firewall policies. You can get really, really creative with them. When you, if you have the blocking USB drive enabled, somebody tries to open a USB drive. Let me just open something here. Apparently I've got more than one policy, so I'm just going to find that one, test, see what policy that's hitting. Oh, I've got a policy to allow that. apparently somewhere else. There you go. I'll delete my permit policy. Give that a second to replicate. So when you have the policy to block external storage or USB or whatever it may be, the user is going to be presented with that same simple pop-up saying this has been blocked. Do you want to request permission? If your administrator is present, he can override for a temporary period of time. So I'm just going to hit request. Here we can see it in the approval center. We'll get a link in an email in our ticketing system. We can click it directly on the link, approve based on the serial number, read only, read and write. And it's very, very quick. So the moment we click approve there, within 60 seconds, the user is going to be able to open that USB drive. We can see here it's created a policy for us to allow that USB drive based on its serial number. You can see here that I should be able to, I can open that now. But we can also get much more granular than that. So we can say, I'm only going to let you read from this USB drive. I'm only going to let you read if it's encrypted or not encrypted. I'm only going to let you read this type of file using this application. For certain users and groups, you can say, I'm going to allow encrypted USB drives or things like that. So here now, what I've done is I've just said you can only use JPEG files. So if I go into here and try and open something that's not JPEG, apparently I didn't wait long enough. It's going to get denied. I can't copy that file, and that's denied. And even things like, and this is a new feature as well that was released in the last few months, where you can now even set policies around your desktop or your local C drive. So if you have a folder on your C drive you want to protect, you want to avoid people changing or apps changing, you can create a policy to protect that drive. So in this case, I have a policy that says block saving files to people's desktop. So I've literally said you can't save any of these file types to desktop. So we just deny write, don't even allow them to request. And that's a very simple policy to put in place. I go into my share here. I can't copy anything to my desktop. And again, everything's audited. So everything that happens, whether permitted, denied, we can always see it here in the audit. And to live, I'm just going through these questions again for a moment. I have a question about false positives. Technically, there's no false positives when you're using whitelisting because nothing is getting allowed unless it's on the list. And if it's on the list, it's getting allowed. However, we call them really events. So if something's blocked that shouldn't be blocked. So there's a few examples where this might happen. Obviously, if a user downloads a file and it's not allowed to run, that is blocked and they have to request permission. That's the end goal here, that you can't run something unless you've got permission. You could have, sometimes there may be issues during the first few weeks where you have a weird application like a payroll app or some kind of strange app that downloads updates from the internet every day. They're not signed. There's no way of creating a policy, an automatic policy around them. In those cases, we can create exceptions. They're very, very easy to create. You can just simply add an exception. You can use regular expressions. You can use conditional rules. If you do get to that situation, especially if you're new to ThreatLocker, we do recommend you click to get help from one of our cyber heroes, and they'll typically respond within 30 seconds and give you the best way to deal with that issue. Should delete any applications that do not have. So I've been asked a question, as a best practice, should you delete any applications that do not have a policy match within the last 6 weeks? That's what we do internally, and that is a good practice, because typically if someone hasn't opened an application within 6 weeks, they're not going to open it at all. And all you're doing is leaving a piece of software on your computer that could potentially be exploited, used against you for no upside. Just typing these, getting through these questions. Well, I'll step back to that one because it's a little bit longer. So I don't know if Zach, you have any input or anything from here that you've seen, or any questions yourself from it as a ThreatLocker user?
Other than the fact that it's extremely easy to use and it's basically one pane of glass to quickly determine what the end user is trying to launch. And with the storage control too, one of the things that is extremely helpful is when somebody moves a folder. We had a case last week with a client that the employee just up and moved a folder, and it was like, how in the world it ended up 10 folders deep inside of something. We were able to, quickly search within 60 seconds and determine exactly where that wound up and who the end user was. So it's extremely fast. It's kind of like a Google search for your system event logs.
Mike, I know you've been pretty quiet. Did you have anything to add? Did you have any questions? I know the 20 has recently partnered with ThreatLocker, and you have quite a few members. I don't know what your thoughts are. And
No, I mean, I'm excited about the partnership. Having guys like some of the members here that are already on the product. I mean, I'm just great things. So I'm looking forward to 2020.
Okay, that's good to hear. So I'm reading this last question. It's a bit long-winded, so I'm just trying to understand it. Okay, so I think the gist of it is it's really about elevation. So whitelisting using group policy in Active Directory is an effective tool. It's not a full whitelist, and the reason I say that is because it only runs at the user level. And while that deals with the user element of running an exe, they shouldn't be, or at least it doesn't cover every type of exe. It doesn't cover 16-bit. It is still better than nothing. Where we do see a lot of malware recently, especially the most effective malware attacks, is where malware is being pushed out through group policy. And that's a whole bunch of other issues as well that they got onto their domain controller. But I can give you an example where we had a client, someone had got onto their domain controller, they pushed out ransomware, and ThreatLocker had blocked it on all of the computers running ThreatLocker. You just saw it in the audit, it was blocked. It didn't matter that it was pushed out through group policy. And it doesn't matter if it's pushed out through an exploit. So that's really important. I think the rest of the gist is, do we still need to lock down PC, remove admin rights for the end user? My opinion as a security professional is absolutely users should not be admins. Yes, with ThreatLocker, you can tie them down so much that they can't do anything that's necessarily damaging. But there's a reason they have layers in security. So I always believe the more security you can get, the better. And you don't need to be an admin to run ransomware. You don't need to be an admin to encrypt your files or steal your data. So whitelisting is huge in that. We're not having local admins does not protect you from that. But having users as local admin it means if someone does get into a system, if you do permit something, that they have far more power, and they're able to, those viruses are able to spread across your systems like wildfire. So you should always operate on the least privilege when necessary. Now I'm a security guy, so some people say I'm paranoid, but that's my thought on that. I don't know if you have a thought on whether users should be local admins, Zach, or...
Yeah, we don't allow any of our users to be local admins. There are certain instances with, certain pieces of software that the software developer is adamant about that. But we try our best to not have anybody a local admin, and if they are, the restrictions with ThreatLocker, we carefully evaluate what's being allowed.
Okay, so we do have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to pick them, and I'm not ignoring anyone. If we don't answer, we'll promise we'll come back to you and answer afterwards. I'm trying to feel the most relevant ones. If someone else, would ThreatLocker work if someone plugged in their personal network drive and mapped a network drive? So from the server-side policies, it's going to block them anything that's not permitted. So if they try and push something to that, if they have the credentials, they can still read the data if the server-side policies allow them to. The advantage of the client-end policies is because you can actually see the application that's accessing it, not just the user, not just the file types and things like that. Whereas server-side policies can only see the stuff that, like the username, the file types and things like that. The application is always unknown. So if someone did plug in their application, that would be the case. That said, we have a new release coming next year that actually adds firewalling into ThreatLocker. And one of the features of that firewall, because we have the outbound firewall almost now with the ring fencing, but we're going to have an inbound firewall where you can't accept TCP/IP connections. One of the features is you can actually configure your file server to reject TCP/IP traffic from any client not running ThreatLocker. So that hopefully answers that one. Somebody has asked us to re-describe the red and green meaning in policies. So when, I think they kind of answered their own question. We did touch on this at the beginning. When you're in monitor mode, you can now just search for anything being denied, even if it's monitoring and still being permitted, and it will show up in the audit as being denied. It will show up as green if it's actually permitted. If you expand on it, you can see monitor mode and the effective action is actually permitted. And it will show as red if it was actually denied. So hopefully that clarifies on that one. Somebody asked about Autocad and it being updated and being caught. I don't know if this is a customer using Autocad and maybe hasn't set it up, doesn't have the built-in application. We do have built-in applications for Autocad. We are adding built-in applications from 2 of the other Autocad products. We're on the app team's list this week to add as built-in applications. So if they are being blocked, it probably means you just need to apply the built-in app. If it's still not working, it could be that it's an older version, not in our built-in apps. In that case, you can we can create custom policies to allow it. What I would suggest, if that's the issue, is that you maybe just drop in a chat to live chat and we'll have a look at it and see what's causing it. So, somebody's asked about the auto elevate feature, and this is something that's been on our roadmap for a long time and been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back because of complexities around it. We'd like the ability to elevate non-admins. This is something that we do intend to release. I would like to say it's Q1 next year. I'm so scared because this is the one feature we've pushed back because of complexities with it. It has to be done right if we're going to release it. Because obviously if we're adding a feature in where you can elevate a non-admin, it has to be extremely secure because that's potentially dangerous. So that is something on our roadmap and it will happen at some point. And somebody asked if there are any issues with VMware, Horizon, or VDI desktops. We use it in VDI environments very heavily, in VMware and Citrix and multiple session-based deployments. If you are using VMware VDIs, there's 2 ways we can configure it. One is if the PC gets reset back to the image, we can make it so it remaps them using the host name each time it comes online. If it's just a typical VDI where it maintains its state, that's not an issue, but we have a lot of deployments in those environments. I think I've answered that one. And someone asked how the Stub installer works. So when you install the Stub installer, you can use it. I'll just go to the computers page here just very quickly. And I'd recommend you do speak to someone on our integrations team, depending on your RMM. But when you use the Stub installer, you can just use the standard installer and pass switches in. But it also supports switches being passed in. So it supports passing in the company name, a group name, a key, an API key. So if you're pushing it out through your RMM, you can just pass in like the variable of the company name and it will automatically provision the client on our system for you. So, and that, it literally takes, we've done it was only released a week ago, and I know we've done a few 500 plus deployments this week on it alone where it created all the clients and it works very, very smoothly. What I'd recommend is if you do want to use the Stub installer on your RMM, you go onto the Calendly link and you set up a deployment call with one of our deployment specialists. So I think we're a little bit over on our time. Any questions we didn't answer, we will reach out to the person. I really appreciate everyone joining us today. And Zach, I really appreciate you coming on as well, and Mike as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you guys. And we will be posting the recording. So thank you for your time. If anyone missed it or wants to share it, feel free to share the recording. Okay, thanks guys. Everyone have a good day and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.